Good morning, everybody. Today, I want to talk about church. Um, and I was thinking of a scripture to base what I'm going to say off of. But there's so many scriptures about church. Pretty much all the epistles are about church. So I would have to read to you Romans through Revelation. We ain't got time for that. So then I thought maybe I got this open here. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. I guess I'll go with that. You've got the Apostle Paul talking about the church coming together, using their gifts together. You got Apostle Paul talking about how the eye can't say the hand, I don't need you. The hand can't say the foot, I don't need you, whatnot. So respecting one another's gifts, respecting who one another are. So it's about unity and harmony. And then it gets into order of service as far as like not getting out, so church doesn't get out of hand and get crazy. And then we get into the resurrection of Christ and how that worship is pure and how that understanding of the resurrection is pure and how that affects how we serve one another and outside. But that's a whole other, it gets deep. It gets deep. But still, that's not good enough. Really, you need to kind of look at everything, Romans through Revelation, right? We ain't got time for that, like I said. But what do you think of when you think of church? When you hear the word Christian, when you hear the word religion? It doesn't really have to be just Christianity. What kind of things go through your head? I think a lot of the things you might come to mind aren't good, and I would be right there with you. You think of church, you think of religion, you think of cults, scandals. You might think of war. Well, there's enough of that going on right now. You might think of abuse, unfortunately. Now, none of these things are biblical, all right? These are things that we think of, but they're not biblical. You know, cults, as far as the word today, when we think of cults, comes down to control. And we're not supposed to be that controlling, biblically speaking. In fact, Apostle Paul even speaks against that in Galatians, but yet we still think about it, though, you know? War. You know what I'm saying? Now, there's a lot of war in the Bible, but not in the same way that we think of it, is for like corruption and for gain. And then once you take over a land, abusing the people, like that's kind of what we think of. And again, that's not biblical. When we think of scandals, you know, that's not biblical. That's not how it's supposed to be. It's not what we're supposed to think of. Abuse, definitely not. You might think, when you think of church, you might come to faith, and then you might think, well, faith is silly, it's useless, it's out of date. But that's not biblical. I understand why some would think that. But faith is not supposed to be this blind faith. It's like my faith's not blind faith. I go to God, for example, I go to God for comfort because I know I always find comfort in God. So it's not blind faith, but it's still faith, you know? You might feel like church is confusing, like we're divisive, and yeah, I would say that, but it's not supposed to be that way. You might think that church is boring, and I'm like, yeah, but it's not supposed to be that way. If you read the Gospels, Jesus is anything but boring. So why do we think that way when we think about church? And I think it comes down to us. It's our fault as Christians. You can take a look at any movement in history, any movement at all, and movements get tainted and sometimes totally stop due to hypocrisy. Any movement at all, big or small movement, hypocrisy is a killer. And I think that's where we're at as Christians. It's our fault. The good news is that can change whenever you want it to. That can change today. Change is always possible today, right? A general statement beyond the context of what I'm saying. Change is possible today if you choose to change it. But back to my context, as Christians, we have to really lay hold of this thing. It's why Jesus says that, you know, you can't, I'm paraphrasing, but you can't be a disciple unless you're willing to give everything, right? Being a disciple costs you really everything. You know, if it says no one can come to me, Jesus says no one comes to me and doesn't hate his brothers, sisters, mother, brother, even his own life is worthy to be my disciple. And what he means by that is just what I said. You have to Jesus has to be it. He has to be your focus, right? He has to be your reason and why you do everything else. If not, well, then you fall in danger of being a hypocrite. For example, forgiveness. Forgiveness is a big point in Christianity. And so if you're in a relationship of any kind, and you are unforgiving, and you decide you're going to camp out in unforgiveness and just not forgive this person, well, then you're being a hypocrite, right? And that hurts the gospel. It hurts your witness. It hurts anyone who's viewing your life. And it's one more thing when they think of church and Christianity, one more thing that makes them say, no thank you. It's our fault. So it comes down to this, church. What kind of believer are you going to be? You know? The church is supposed to be beautiful. I love the gospel. I love how the gospel brings forth equality. The gospel is a beautiful thing that it gives us all a sense of belonging and acceptance. It empowers us. It fulfills you. I could go on and on and on how beautiful and how powerful the gospel is. And the church is supposed to be the house for the gospel. The church is supposed to be us as Christ. But that's often not how it is. And it comes down to how we're believing, right? Belief is supposed to lead to action. So what kind of believer are you going to be? Are you going to be a believer who goes into action with a pure understanding of the gospel and the church, of God's love, God's heart for others? Or you're just going to kind of do whatever you want to do. You're going to be that type of believer. You're going to be the type of believer where you're going to kind of check the box off as Christian or whatever it is you believe, but not really do anything with it. Like, what's the point? You're just kind of pretending. You're being a hypocrite. So I leave that with you, church. It's our fault that people think such negative things when it comes to church. But we can change that today. Will you change that today?